My name is Mary Thompson, and I'm 35 years old. I grew up in Pine Hollow, a small Oregon town where the scent of pine needles fills the air and folks live by unwritten rules: church every Sunday, potlucks at the Grange Hall, and a life planned out from cradle to grave. I was never wired that way. While my family preached fitting in, I was the kid sketching sunsets or reading about far-off cities, dreaming of a life beyond our sleepy valley. That made me an outcast in my own home, and my family shunned me for it, until they discovered I owned the resort that turned Pine Hollow into a tourist hotspot. If you've ever been pushed aside for being yourself, this story's for you. Stick around and please drop a comment below to tell me where you're watching from. Hit that like button if you've ever felt judged for being different, and subscribe to see how I turned betrayal into victory. Let's dive in. Pine Hollow was the kind of place where stepping out of line got you whispers at the grocery store. My parents, Harold and Susan Thompson, were the heart of that world. Dad, pushing 60, owned the town's hardware store, always in a flannel shirt, quoting proverbs to customers. Mom, a few years younger, ruled the PTA, her kitchen a shrine to her legendary peach cobbler, served at every community event. They raised me, my brother Greg, and my sister Ellen to follow their path. Graduate high school, get a safe job, marry young, stay close. Greg, 40, was their star. High school linebacker turned banker, strutting around with a flashy watch. Ellen, 38, married her prom date and had 3 kids, the picture of Pine Hollow perfection. Then there was me, the youngest, who'd rather hike with a sketchbook than bake cookies for the church bazaar. I was different from the start, and my family made sure I knew it. I'd spend weekends at the library, lost in books about Paris or Tokyo, or sketching the Cascades in pencil. Mom called it laziness. Dad grumbled I was too big for my britches, warning I'd end up penniless and alone if I didn't shape up. Greg dubbed me Freaky Mary, laughing when I skipped homecoming to paint murals at a youth center. Ellen tried to be gentle, sighing I'd settle down someday. But her pity stung worse than Greg's jabs. Family dinners were a firing squad. Why didn't I try out for softball? Why wasn't I dating Tommy from youth group? Why couldn't I be normal like Ellen? By 16, I felt like a guest in my own house, tiptoeing around their disapproval. The breaking point came in 2008 when I was 18. I got a partial scholarship to a community college in Seattle for hospitality management, inspired by a dog-eared travel magazine I'd found at a thrift store. I wanted to run hotels, maybe own one, see the world. When I told my family, it was like I'd set off a bomb. Dad slammed his beer on the table, yelling that college was a waste for a girl who should work at his store or marry a good Christian. Mom sobbed, accusing me of turning my back on them. Greg smirked, betting I'd crash and burn in the city. Ellen whispered, "You're hurting them, Mary?" I begged them to understand. Seattle was a few hours away, I'd visit, but they shut me down. Dad gave me a choice: stay in Pine Hollow or leave, and don't expect to be welcomed back. With a knot in my chest, I chose to leave. Leaving home in August 2008 was like tearing my soul in half. I had $150 from waitressing, a beat-up backpack, and a one-way bus ticket. Mom didn't say goodbye. She left a post-it on my door. "You're making a mistake." Dad stared out the window as I left. Greg and Ellen didn't bother showing up. The bus to Seattle was a blur of tears, my sketchbook my only comfort. When I arrived, the city hit me like a tidal wave, honking cars, towering buildings, a world that didn't care if I sank or swam. I rented a moldy basement room in a boarding house, sharing a sink with 5 strangers. My first job was cleaning rooms at a shady motel off I-5, scrubbing stains for $7 an hour. My hands cracked from bleach, my back ached, but I told myself it was a start. Those first years were a gauntlet. Seattle's drizzle soaked my thrift store jacket, and I survived on ramen and free coffee from work. 6 months in, I missed rent by a week, and my landlord dumped my stuff in an alley. I spent 3 nights in a shelter, my sketchbook stuffed in my coat, humiliated but too proud to call home. A coworker, Jenny, took me in, letting me sleep on her couch in a cramped apartment. It smelled of cat litter, but it was shelter. I'd lie awake, hearing sirens, wondering if Dad's prophecy was coming true. My family's rejection was a constant wound. I sent postcards about my first A in college, my promotion to night clerk. They never answered. I called on Mom's birthday, but she hung up saying, "We don't know you anymore." Greg told Pine Hollow I'd gone city and forgotten my roots. And childhood friends ghosted me, swayed by his lies. It wasn't just losing family, it was losing my entire world. Money was a relentless enemy. My scholarship covered tuition, but textbooks and rent devoured my paychecks. I worked 50-hour weeks studying at 2 a.m. with a flickering lamp. My sneakers fell apart and I taped them together, too broke for new ones. In 2009, a fender bender left me with a $2,200 medical bill for a bruised shoulder. I pawned my grandmother's silver locket, my only keepsake, sobbing as the pawnbroker handed me $80. Every hurdle felt personal, like the universe was testing me. Worse, a coworker I trusted, Mark, stole credit for a guest service idea I pitched, earning a promotion while I stayed a clerk. Betrayed again, I nearly quit, but Jenny's words kept me going. "You're tougher than they think." I clawed my way up. By 2011, I graduated with a degree and landed a job as a front desk supervisor at a downtown hotel. A mentor, Clara, saw my knack for operations and pushed me to aim higher. I worked nights, saved obsessively, and by my late 20s, I was managing a boutique hotel. In 2015, I made a risky move, partnering with Clara to buy a failing resort near Pine Hollow, Cascade Haven. We turned it into a luxury retreat, using a trust to hide my ownership. By 2025, it was a gem. Pools, farm-to-table dining, mountain views, drawing tourists, and transforming Pine Hollow into a destination. I never told my family. Their silence had taught me to guard my victories. Life had bright spots. I loved Seattle's vibe, sketching at Fremont Market, laughing with Jenny over cheap wine, learning from Clara's business savvy. But the ache for family never faded. I'd see siblings joking at cafes or moms hugging daughters, and it'd hit me like a punch. I dated briefly, but trust was a hurdle. How do you love when your family discarded you? By 35, I'd built a life I was proud of, with Cascade Haven as my crown jewel. Then, in April 2025, a letter arrived from Ellen. My hands trembled as I read it. Mom and Dad were celebrating their 35th anniversary in Pine Hollow, and they wanted me there. "We've missed you," Ellen wrote, but the words felt like a trap. The event was set for June 7th, 2025, at the town's banquet hall. I agonized for days. Part of me hoped they'd softened, that they'd see me as more than Freaky Mary. But another part, scarred by their cruelty, suspected an agenda. Clara urged me to go. "Show them who you are," she said. Jenny grinned, saying, "Walk in like you own the place." Oh wait, you do. I booked a flight to Portland and a rental car, packing a simple black dress and my old sketchbook, a talisman of my true self. The night before, I stared at a photo of Cascade Haven on my phone, its lights glowing against the mountains. My resort. My proof. I wondered if my family would care, or if they'd just mock me again. Driving into Pine Hollow felt like stepping into a dream. The town had grown, cafes, gift shops, signs for my resort. But the welcome sign stirred old wounds. I parked at the banquet hall, its lot packed with gleaming trucks and SUVs. Inside, I saw balloons, fairy lights, and a crowd in their best jeans and dresses. My heart raced as I smoothed my dress and walked in, the buzz of voices mixing with the weight of stares, some curious, some sharp. My family, the people who'd erased me, were waiting, and I was about to face the judgment I'd run from 17 years ago. The banquet hall's glow hit me like a spotlight as I stepped inside, the air thick with perfume and the clink of wine glasses. Pine Hollow had changed, but this scene, streamers, folding tables, and a buzz of small-town pride, felt ripped from my childhood. I was 35 now, a far cry from the 18-year-old who'd fled with a backpack and a broken heart, but the weight of my family's judgment pressed down just the same. I smoothed my black dress, my sketchbook tucked in my purse like armor, and scanned the room. There they were, Harold, Susan, Greg, and Ellen, holding court near a balloon arch, surrounded by Pine Hollow's finest. I took a breath and walked toward them, my rental car keys jingling in my pocket, each step a reminder of the empire I'd built in secret. Cascade Haven, the resort that had turned this town into a tourist magnet. They didn't know, and from the looks on their faces as I approached, they didn't care to. Mom spotted me first. Susan Thompson, her hair still dyed chestnut, froze mid-laugh, her peach cobbler smile fading. "Mary," she said, loud enough to draw eyes. No hug, no warmth, just my name like a question she didn't want answered. "Dad," Harold glanced up from his beer, his flannel shirt crisp for the occasion. His nod was curt, like I was a customer at his hardware store, not his daughter. Greg, 40 and smug in a tailored blazer, smirked, whispering something to Ellen, who stifled a giggle. Ellen, 38, looked every inch the Pine Hollow mom. Blonde bob, pearl earrings, a dress-screaming PTA president. She gave me a pitying smile, the kind you'd offer a stray dog. "You made it," she said, as if I'd crashed their party, not been invited after 17 years of silence. The crowd parted and I felt the stares. Neighbors, cousins, old teachers, their whispers slicing through the chatter. I wanted to say something bold, to tell them I wasn't the freaky Mary they'd branded me, but Mom cut in. "Well, don't just stand there," she said, gesturing to a table piled with casseroles. "Grab a plate, we're about to toast." No questions about my life, no apologies for the years of nothing. I nodded, my throat tight, and moved to the buffet, the weight of their dismissal heavier than I'd expected. As I scooped green bean casserole, a voice hissed behind me. "Still too good for us, huh?" It was Donna, my cousin. Her eyes narrow. I hadn't seen her since I was a kid, but her venom was fresh, fed by years of my family's stories. I forced a smile, mumbling, "Good to see you," but she turned away, already gossiping with a woman I didn't recognize. The toasts began, and I stood at the edge of the crowd, clutching a plastic cup of punch. Greg took the mic first, his voice booming. "To Mom and Dad, the glue of Pine Hollow, who taught us family comes first." The room cheered, but his eyes flicked to me, a challenge. Ellen followed, gushing about their perfect marriage and how she and Greg made them proud, banker son, homemaker daughter, 3 grandkids. Not a word about me. Mom stepped up, her voice syrupy. "We're blessed to have Greg and Ellen carrying on our values," she said, pausing for applause. "And, well, Mary's here too." The room went quiet, a few heads turning. She didn't elaborate, just raised her glass. I felt my face burn, the punch souring in my mouth. They'd erased me, right here in front of everyone, like I was a footnote in their legacy. I slipped to a corner's table, hoping to blend in, but the hits kept coming. Aunt Linda, Mom's sister, plopped down beside me, her breath heavy with wine. "Heard you're still single," she said, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "No kids, no husband? What do you do up in Seattle anyway? Waitress?" I swallowed hard, saying, "I work in hospitality," but she snorted. "Fancy word for cleaning rooms, I bet." Before I could respond, she was off, spreading her version of me to a gaggle of cousins. I scanned for an ally, but even old neighbors I'd known as a kid, like Mrs. Carter, my 3rd-grade teacher, avoided my gaze, their loyalty tied to my parents' narrative. I was the traitor who ditched Pine Hollow, and no one let me forget it. Then came the financial sting. As dessert was served, Mom's cobbler, of course, Ellen pulled me aside, her smile tight. "The party's over budget," she said, not meeting my eyes. "We need everyone to chip in. Your share's $2,500. I blinked, stunned. "You didn't mention this before?" I said, my voice low. She shrugged. "Your family, Mary." "Don't make a scene." I hadn't planned for this, and my personal savings, already thin from helping a friend with a medical bill, couldn't take the hit. But the eyes on us, the weight of being the outsider, pressed me to comply. I transferred the money from my phone, my stomach twisting as the balance dipped. Ellen didn't thank me, just walked away, leaving me to wonder if the invitation was a setup to bleed me dry. The worst blow came during the slideshow, a montage of my parents' life projected on a screen. Photos flashed. Greg's football games, Ellen's wedding, grandkids' birthdays. Not one image of me. No baby photos, no awkward braces phase, nothing from the 18 years I'd lived under their roof. The crowd cooed, oblivious, but I felt like I'd been erased from history. A woman nearby, someone's aunt, leaned over. "Guess you weren't around much," she said, her tone accusing. I wanted to scream that they'd pushed me out, but I bit my tongue, my hands shaking. As the slideshow ended, Greg announced the family's next big plan: a week-long vacation at Cascade Haven, the luxury resort just outside town. "It's the best spot in Oregon," he bragged, "and we're going all out." The room clapped, but my heart sank when Ellen added, "It's a family thing, you know, for those who've stuck around." Her glance at me was sharp, a clear message. I wasn't invited. I stood frozen, the rejection cutting deeper than I'd braced for. They were flaunting their trip to my resort, the place I'd poured my soul into, without a clue I owned it. Part of me wanted to blurt it out, to watch their faces crumble, but I held back. I'd built Cascade Haven from a bankrupt dump into a 5-star retreat. Pools, gourmet restaurants, views that made guests gasp. I'd kept my name off the deeds, using a trust to stay anonymous, not ready for Pine Hollow to claim credit for my work. Clara, my manager and friend, ran the day-to-day, letting me stay in the shadows. But now, hearing my family plan to parade through my creation while slamming the door in my face, I felt a fire spark. They thought I was nothing, a failure scraping by in Seattle. They had no idea. The party dragged on, and I became a ghost in the room. Cousins I barely remembered brushed past me, their conversations about Greg's big deals or Ellen's perfect kids a reminder of my exile. A childhood friend, Sarah, approached, but her smile faded when she saw me. "Didn't expect you here," she said, then hurried off, as if my presence tainted her. I overheard Mom telling a neighbor I'd chosen a selfish life, her words a knife twisting in old wounds. Dad stayed silent, his eyes on his plate, unwilling to defend me. The final straw came when Donna, my cousin, cornered me near the coat rack. "Why'd you even come back?" she slurred, her breath sour. "You don't belong here." I wanted to argue, to tell her about the resort, the years of struggle. But her words echoed my family's verdict. I was an outsider, unworthy of their circle. As the night wound down, I slipped outside, the June air cool against my flushed cheeks. Leaning against my rental car, I pulled out my sketchbook, flipping to a drawing of Cascade Haven's entrance. Glass doors framed by cedar, mountains rising behind. It was mine, built from nights of ramen and betrayal, and they were about to waltz in. Clueless. I could let them, stay silent, and go back to Seattle, untouched but unseen. Or I could follow, watch them in my world, and decide when or if to drop the truth. Clara's voice echoed in my head. "Show them who you are." I opened my phone and booked a stay at Cascade Haven under a fake name, Mary Evans, for the same week as their trip. I'd check in quietly, blend in, and see just how far their arrogance stretched. The decision wasn't about revenge, not yet. It was about understanding. Did they still see me as the freak who'd fled? Or was there a chance, however small, for something more? I drove to my hotel, a budget motel on the edge of Pine Hollow, and lay awake, the banquet hall's humiliations replaying, the $2,500 I'd paid, the slideshow's erasure, Donna's sneer. They weren't just slights, they were a campaign to keep me small. But I wasn't small anymore. I'd built an empire, and they were about to walk through its gates, blind to the truth. Tomorrow, I'd pack for Cascade Haven, ready to face them on my turf, where every stone and beam whispered my name, even if they didn't hear it yet. The motel's neon sign buzzed outside my window, casting red light across the room. I traced the sketch of my resort, my finger lingering on the entrance where my family would arrive, oblivious. They thought they knew me, a failure, a dreamer, a girl who didn't fit. Soon, they'd see the woman I'd become, but only when I was ready. For now, I'd watch, wait, and let their own actions dig the hole they'd fall into. The reunion had shown me their hearts, cold, proud, unyielding. Cascade Haven would show them mine. The glass doors of Cascade Haven parted with a whisper as I stepped into the lobby, sunlight streaming through the cedar-framed windows. My rental car was parked outside, tucked among sleek SUVs, and my purse held a keycard registered to Mary Evans, a name my family wouldn't recognize. The resort was a symphony of elegance, marble floors, the murmur of a fountain, the scent of lavender drifting from vases. I'd built this place from a crumbling relic into Oregon's crown jewel, with suites that drew celebrities and views that stole breaths. But today I was a ghost in my own creation, here to watch my family. Harold, Susan, Greg, and Ellen flaunt their arrogance in the space I'd crafted, unaware I owned every inch. After their cold dismissal at the anniversary party, I needed to see how far their entitlement stretched before deciding if the truth was worth revealing. I checked in at the front desk, my pulse steady as I handed over my alias ID. The clerk, Sophie, smiled brightly, unaware she was greeting her boss. Clara, my manager and closest ally, had ensured the staff treated me like any guest, preserving my cover. Across the lobby, Clara was briefing a concierge, her sharp eyes catching mine for a split second. Her nod was subtle, a signal our plan was in motion. I'd blend in, observe, and let my family's actions dictate my next move. The elevator hummed to the 4th floor, and I settled into my suite, a haven of cream linens and mountain vistas. Dropping my bag, I pulled out my sketchbook, its edges worn but intact, and traced a drawing of the resort's terrace. This was my turf, and they were about to play by my rules, even if they didn't know it. Trouble started at the rooftop pool. I wandered there mid-morning, a wide-brimmed hat shielding my face, and spotted my family sprawled across prime lounge chairs. Greg, in garish swim trunks, was waving down a server, snapping his fingers like he owned the place. "This mojito's flat," he barked, shoving the glass back. Ellen, scrolling her phone in a sequined cover-up, barely looked up as she ordered another round of drinks, her voice dripping with expectation. Susan, fanning herself with a cocktail menu, complained loudly about the glaring sun, demanding extra umbrellas. Harold sipped a whiskey, muttering about overpriced nonsense. Other guests shot them annoyed glances, but they were oblivious, their small-town swagger clashing with the resort's refined air. I sipped an iced tea at a corner table, my notepad open as if sketching, but my eyes tracked every move. They were treating my staff like props, and it took everything not to intervene. The first real hit came that evening in the dining room, a rustic chic space with antler chandeliers and linen napkins. I sat alone, a book propped as a shield, while my family's table dominated the room. Greg was holding court, boasting to a couple nearby about his big deals in Pine Hollow's bank, inflating his mid-level job into something grand. Then his voice sharpened, cutting through the clink of cutlery. "My sister showed up to our parents' party, acting like she's made it," he said, loud enough for nearby tables to turn. "Bet she's washing dishes somewhere, begging for a room here." Susan nodded, adding, "Always was a dreamer, never a doer." My fork stilled, their words a fresh bruise after the party's erasure. They didn't see me, didn't know I was the owner they'd soon demand to meet, but the public jab stung, their myth of my failure alive and well. A deeper wound opened the next day. I'd left my suite for a walk in the resort's gardens, a maze of wildflowers and stone paths, when I returned to find my door unlocked. My heart sank as I stepped inside. My suitcase was open, clothes strewn across the floor, and my sketchbook, my sanctuary, was missing. Panic surged until I found it shoved under the bed, its cover creased and a page ripped out. A post-it stuck to it read, "Nice try, Mary. Still a nobody," in Greg's blocky scrawl. He'd somehow learned my room number and broken in, a violation that felt like a fist to my chest. I sank onto the bed, clutching the damaged book, its torn page a sketch of Pine Hollow's old library. This wasn't just mockery. It was an invasion, a deliberate attempt to break me. I called Clara, my voice shaking. "They're escalating," she said, her tone grim. "We'll tighten security, but stay sharp." I nodded, resolve hardening. They'd crossed a line, and I wouldn't let it slide. The professional threat hit harder. At lunch in the bistro, I overheard a conversation that froze my blood. Miss Harper, a major investor who'd funded Cascade Haven's expansion, was at a nearby table speaking to her assistant. "The guests here are out of control," she said, nodding toward Ellen, who was berating a waiter over a cold salad. "If the owner can't manage their clientele, I'm rethinking my stake." I gripped my coffee cup, dread pooling. Harper's investment was critical, and Ellen's tantrum, paired with my family's overall behavior, was jeopardizing doubt. Clara confirmed the risk later, showing me an email from Harper requesting a meeting to discuss standards. My family's antics weren't just personal, they were jeopardizing a fire that could burn my business down. I felt cornered, my cover straining under the pressure to act. Then came the staff betrayal. That afternoon, I was in the lobby checking guest logs on Clara's tablet when Sophie, the front desk clerk, approached Greg near the concierge desk. I ducked behind a fern, close enough to hear. "You asked about Mary Evans?" Sophie whispered, glancing around. "She's in suite 412, but I think she's your sister, Mary Thompson. Her ID looked off." Greg's eyes gleamed, and he slipped Sophie a $20 bill. "Keep it quiet," he said. My stomach lurched. Sophie, a new hire, had leaked my alias, likely swayed by Greg's charm and cash. Now he knew I was here, and his break-in made sense. He'd targeted me deliberately. The staff's trust, my shield, was cracking. Clara fired Sophie that evening, but the damage was done. Some employees whispered as I passed, their glances wary, Greg's influence spreading like poison. My family's behavior grew more brazen. Susan demanded a private yoga session, then complained the instructor was unprofessional for suggesting she stretch gently. Ellen posted a scathing TripAdvisor review mid-stay, calling the spa overhyped, tagging Cascade Haven to shame it publicly. Harold, emboldened, argued with a bartender over a weak bourbon, threatening to talk to the boss. Their complaints piled up, each one a slap to the staff I'd trained to excel. I worked with Clara behind the scenes, smoothing ruffled feathers, extra tips for servers, apologies to guests disturbed by the noise. "They're a liability," Clara said during a late-night call. "What's your move?" I wasn't sure, but their demand for a meeting with the owner was looming, and I knew it was my chance to shift the game. The emotional blow landed during a wine tasting event in the vineyard, rows of grapevines glowing under string lights. I stood at the edge, a glass of Pinot in hand, watching my family mingle with other guests. Ellen, tipsy, was laughing with a local couple, her voice carrying. "My sister's probably jealous, stuck in some dead-end job," she said, gesturing grandly. "We're here living the high life, and she's nowhere." The couple nodded sympathetically, and I turned away, my throat tight. It wasn't just the lie, it was the glee in her voice, the ease with which they erased me. A server, noticing my distress, offered a refill, but I shook my head, retreating to the shadows. Their words weren't new, but hearing them in my sanctuary, surrounded by my creation, made the betrayal sharper. The tipping point came that night. Clara texted me to her office, her expression tight. "Your family's pushing for a meeting tomorrow," she said, sliding a tablet across her desk. "They're threatening legal action. Say the resort's misrepresented its services." I scanned their email, a list of grievances. Subpar rooms, rude staff, false advertising. Greg had signed it, claiming they'd consult a lawyer unless compensated with free stays and cash. The audacity stunned me. They were trying to extort my resort, blind to my role. Clara handed me a dossier. Security footage of Greg's break-in, staff statements about their rudeness, screenshots of Ellen's review. "You've got them cold," she said. "What now?" I leaned back, the torn sketchbook heavy in my mind. They'd defiled my space, threatened my livelihood, and mocked my existence. Enough was enough. I spent the night pacing my suite, the mountains dark beyond the glass. I pulled up emails from Cascade Haven's early days, me negotiating loans, Clara celebrating our first 5-star review. This resort was my defiance, proof I'd survived their rejection. Now they were demanding I bow to their whims, unaware I held the power. I texted Clara, "Set the meeting for 10 a.m., I'm done hiding." Tomorrow, I'd walk in as Mary Thompson, owner, and face their greed head-on. They'd crossed every boundary, my privacy, my staff, my dream. I didn't know how they'd react, denial, anger, or groveling, but I was ready to let their choices seal their fate. The stars glittered over Pine Hollow, and I stood on my balcony, the resort's lights warm below. My family thought they were calling out some faceless mogul, but they'd meet me, the woman they'd dismissed as a nobody. The stage was set, and I was no longer the guest. The conference room at Cascade Haven was a study in understated power. Mahogany table, floor-to-ceiling windows framing Oregon's mountains, and soft lighting that made every decision feel weighty. I stood outside the door, my hand steady on the handle, the dossier Clara had prepared tucked under my arm. My family, Harold, Susan, Greg, and Ellen, waited inside, expecting to bully some faceless owner into free perks and apologies. They'd spent days trashing my resort, from Greg's break-in to Ellen's scathing review, even threatening a lawsuit to extort me, all while mocking the nobody they thought I was. Today, I'd step out of the shadows as Mary Thompson, owner of Cascade Haven, and force them to face the truth. The air felt charged, like the calm before a storm, and I pushed the door open, ready to rewrite their story of me. Greg was mid-rant when I entered, his fist on the table, his Hawaiian shirt clashing with the room's elegance. "This place is a scam," he bellowed, glaring at Clara, who sat calmly at the table's head. Ellen nodded, her phone out, typing furiously. Susan fanned herself with a notepad, muttering about poor management, while Harold slouched, his beer replaced by coffee but his scowl unchanged. They froze as I walked in, my heels clicking on the hardwood. Greg's smirk faltered, Ellen's phone slipped, and Susan's fan stopped mid-wave. Harold's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing. Clara stood, her voice smooth. "This is Mary Thompson, the owner of Cascade Haven." The silence was deafening, their faces a gallery of shock and disbelief. I set the dossier down, my voice even but firm. "You demanded to meet the owner. Here I am." Greg laughed, a nervous bark. "Nice try, Mary. What, you're playing dress-up now?" Ellen leaned forward, smirking. "Come on, you're a hotel clerk at best. Stop embarrassing yourself." Susan's lips pursed, but her eyes darted, uncertain. I opened the dossier, sliding documents across the table, deeds with my name, photos of me signing the purchase in 2015, emails with investors. "Cascade Haven is mine," I said, pointing to a framed article on the wall, crediting an anonymous visionary for the resort's rise. "I bought it, rebuilt it, and turned Pine Hollow into a destination. You're sitting in my legacy." The room shifted. Ellen's smirk vanished, her phone forgotten. Greg grabbed the deeds, his face reddening as he scanned them. Susan clutched her coffee cup, whispering, "This can't be." Harold stared at the table, his silence louder than ever. Clara stepped in, her tone crisp. "Ms. Thompson has overseen every detail of this resort, from design to operations. Your complaints about service, rooms, staff are complaints about her work." Greg threw the papers down, his voice rising. "This is a setup. You're lying to humiliate us." I met his glare, unflinching. "You humiliated yourselves. Breaking into my suite, Greg, tearing my sketchbook, threatening lawsuits. I have security footage, emails, and staff reports." I slid a tablet toward them, playing a clip of Greg slipping into my room, his face clear. Ellen burst into tears, a performance I'd seen at family dinners. "Mary, how could you spy on us?" she sobbed. Susan joined in, her voice quivering. "We're your family. You're airing our dirty laundry?" I held up a hand, cutting them off. "You demanded this meeting, not me. You trashed my staff, my business, and my name. Now you face the consequences." Harold finally spoke, his voice low. "We didn't know, Mary. You never told us." The excuse stung, but I was ready. "You didn't ask. You shunned me for 17 years, called me a failure, and laughed at my dreams. Why would I share my wins with you?" The first new blow came fast. Greg, cornered, switched tactics, his voice oily. "Look, sis, we're proud of you. Let's work this out. Family sticks together, right?" He leaned forward, grinning like we were kids sharing candy. Maybe we can partner up, get a cut of this place. It's only fair, after all we did for you. I stared, incredulous. They weren't sorry. They saw dollar signs. Ellen nodded eagerly, wiping her tears. We could manage the Pine Hollow side, bring in locals. Susan chimed in. We raised you, Mary. This resort's partly ours. The audacity was breathtaking. They'd rejected me, then demanded my empire. I shook my head. This is mine. You get nothing. The second adversity hit like a slap. As I laid out their consequences, no free stays, full payment of $18,000 for their week, a public apology to my staff, Greg's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his face paling, then shoved it at Ellen. She gasped, showing it to Susan. What is this? I asked, sensing a shift. Greg sneered, recovering. You're not the only one with tricks. A local reporter's here, sniffing around. Someone tipped them about a family feud at Cascade Haven. My stomach dropped. Clara's eyes widened, and I realized the leak likely came from Sophie, the fired clerk who'd betrayed my alias. The Pine Hollow Gazette, small but vicious, could spin this into a scandal, painting me as the heartless owner evicting her family. My resort's reputation, already shaky from Ellen's review, hung by a thread. I kept my composure, addressing their actions. You'll pay your bill by checkout tomorrow, I said, sliding an invoice across. And you'll apologize to my staff in the lobby, 3 p.m., for your rudeness. Ellen scoffed. We're not your servants. I leaned in, voice steel. Your guests who broke my trust. Do it, or I'll release the footage to the press myself. Susan's tears turned real, her voice pleading. Mary, think of your father's heart. This stress could kill him. Harold looked away, unwilling to back her manipulation. I'd heard this guilt trip before, but it didn't work. You chose this, I said, standing. Meeting's over. The third challenge erupted as I left the room. Clara pulled me aside in the hallway, her face tense. We've got a problem, she whispered, showing me a staff group chat. A few employees, loyal to Sophie and swayed by Greg's charm, were threatening to walk out, claiming I'd targeted my family unfairly. Their messages called me cold and vindictive, unaware of the full story. This mini-revolt could cripple operations during peak season, with bookings already strained by Harper's doubts. I felt a pang of betrayal. My staff, my second family, was fracturing under my family's influence. Clara urged a staff meeting to clear the air, but I knew it had to wait. The press leak and family's defiance were the bigger fires. The fallout spread fast. By noon, the Gazette's reporter, a wiry man named Carl, was in the lobby, notepad out, chatting with guests. He'd gotten wind of the meeting, likely from Sophie's tip, and was digging for dirt. A local couple, friends of Susan's, told him I'd disowned my family, twisting the narrative. I overheard Carl on his phone pitching a story. Seattle, tycoon boots Pine Hollow kin from ritzy resort. My heart raced. Negative press could tank bookings and push Harper to pull her funds. I texted Clara to stonewall Carl, offering no comment until I could strategize. But the damage was brewing. Pine Hollow's gossip mill ready to brand me the villain. My family's manipulation deepened the wound. That afternoon, Susan cornered me in the spa lounge, her eyes red but calculated. You're tearing us apart, she said, loud enough for nearby guests to glance over. We sacrificed everything for you, and this is how you repay us? It was a performance designed to guilt me into backing down. A guest whispered to her friend, That's the owner? So cruel. I stepped closer, voice low. You rejected me for 17 years, Mom. Don't play victim now. She gasped, clutching her chest, but I walked away, her act falling flat. Later, Greg sent a text. Drop the bill or we'll tell the press you faked the deeds. Family secrets stay secret, right? The threat was empty. They had no proof, but it showed their desperation, willing to lie to save face. The public apology at 3 p.m. was a tense affair. I stood by the lobby's fountain, staff gathered, guests milling nearby. My family shuffled in, faces sour. Greg spoke first, his voice clipped. We regret any inconvenience to the staff." Ellen mumbled something similar, her eyes on the floor. Susan added a teary, "We're just a family trying to reconnect," turning it into a plea for sympathy. Harold stayed silent, his jaw tight. The staff clapped politely, but I saw their unease. Some, influenced by the chat, shot me skeptical looks. Carl, lurking with his notepad, scribbled furiously, and I knew the Gazette would spin this as a half-hearted gesture. The apology met my terms, but it didn't heal the rift. It widened it, my family's resentment palpable. By evening, the pressure was crushing. I met Clara in her office, the dossier spread out. "The Gazette's running the story tomorrow," she said, showing a draft headline. "Local family ousted by resort tycoon sister." It painted me as heartless, quoting Susan's sacrifice line. Harper had emailed again, demanding a call to discuss stability. The staff chat was still simmering, with 2 servers threatening to quit. I felt like I was losing control, my empire teetering. Clara squeezed my shoulder. "You stood your ground," she said. "Now hold it." I nodded, but doubt crept in. Had I pushed too far, risking everything to prove a point? I retreated to my suite, the mountains dark beyond the glass. I pulled up a photo of Cascade Haven's opening day, me cutting the ribbon, Clara cheering. This was my dream, forged through pain, and they'd tried to claim it. I'd exposed their greed, but at a cost. My name in the mud, my staff divided, my business on the line. Tomorrow, they'd check out, their bill due, and I'd face the fallout. I drafted a press release with Clara, a counter-narrative highlighting my journey and the resort's community impact. I scheduled a staff meeting to address the revolt, promising transparency. And I prepared for Harper's call, ready to fight for my investor. Standing on my balcony, the resort's lights glowing below, I felt a quiet strength. My family had tried to break me, from their shunning to their threats, but I'd stood tall. They'd leave tomorrow, exposed as the opportunists they were, and I'd face whatever came next, press, staff, investors, with the same grit that built this place. The truth was out, and I was no longer their nobody. The battle wasn't over, but I was ready to win it. 6 months after the showdown at Cascade Haven, I stood on the resort's terrace, the Oregon mountains bathed in autumn gold. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and the hum of guests enjoying a harvest festival below. Hay rides, pumpkin carving, a local band strumming folk tunes. My life had transformed since that tense meeting where I'd revealed myself as the owner, forcing my family, Harold, Susan, Greg, and Ellen, to face their greed. The Pine Hollow Gazette scandal, the staff revolt, and investor Harper's doubts had threatened to unravel my empire. But I'd fought through, rebuilding stronger. At 35, I was no longer the outcast of Pine Hollow, nor the nobody my family had branded me. I was Mary Thompson, creator of Cascade Haven, and I'd learned that family isn't blood, it's who lifts you up. This is how I reclaimed my life, and I hope it inspires you to do the same. The fallout from that meeting was a firestorm. The Gazette's story hit the next day, screaming, "Local family ousted by resort tycoon sister." It painted me as a cold-hearted mogul, quoting Susan's tearful, "We sacrificed for her," and Greg's claim of unfair treatment. Pine Hollow's gossip mill churned, with old neighbors posting online that I'd forgotten my roots. Bookings dipped 10% as tourists, swayed by the drama, hesitated. Harper emailed questioning the resort's stability, and 2 servers quit, citing the staff chat's vindictive boss narrative. I could have crumbled, but I didn't. Clara and I launched a counteroffensive, a press release detailing Cascade Haven's journey, from bankrupt dump to 5-star haven, emphasizing my local ties and community impact. We hosted a free open house, inviting Pine Hollow to tour the resort, sample our restaurant, and meet the staff. The turnout was huge, families, shop owners, even skeptical cousins like Donna. They saw the jobs I'd created, the taxes boosting schools, and left with a different story. Bookings rebounded, and Harper not only stayed but increased her investment after a tour, calling me a visionary with grit. The staff revolt was trickier. I held a meeting the day after the apology, laying out the truth. My family's break-in, their extortion attempt, their rudeness. I shared my journey, from Seattle's shelters to Cascade Haven's helm, to show why I'd fought to protect it. Most staff rallied, moved by my honesty, but a few, loyal to Sophie, stayed distant. I offered them severance to leave, hiring new faces who shared our vision. Clara retrained the team, emphasizing guest respect, and morale soared. A new server, Mia, told me, "You're the kind of boss I want to work for. Real." The trust I'd feared lost was rebuilt, stronger, and the resort hummed with purpose. My family's departure was chaotic. They paid the $18,000 bill, scraping it together with loans and Greg's savings, their faces sour at checkout. Susan tried one last guilt trip, whispering, "You've broken your father." But Harold just nodded goodbye, his silence heavy. Greg muttered about legal options, but their lawyer dropped the case when I sent the security footage. Ellen left a note in her suite. "You'll regret this." They returned to Pine Hollow, their pride shattered, and I stayed at the resort, bracing for their next move. It came in the form of a new adversity, a social media smear. Ellen posted a lengthy rant on Facebook, calling me heartless and claiming I'd stolen Cascade Haven's success from family values. Locals chimed in, some defending me, others piling on. The post went viral in Pine Hollow, racking up shares that stung. I wanted to clap back, but Clara advised restraint. "Let their lies burn out," she said. I focused on the resort, hosting a charity gala for a local food bank, which drew positive press and drowned out Ellen's noise. Emotionally, I was raw. The confrontation had freed me, but it left scars. I started therapy with Dr. Ellis, a Seattle counselor who specialized in family dynamics. In our first session, she asked, "What does family mean to you now?" I didn't know. For years, I'd chased Harold and Susan's approval, even after they'd shunned me. Dr. Ellis helped me see their rejection wasn't my fault. It was their fear of my difference. "You built Cascade Haven to prove your worth," she said, "but you're enough without it." Her words hit hard, and I began unpacking 17 years of pain, from Mom's post-it to Greg's sneers. Therapy wasn't a fix, but a map guiding me toward peace. I learned to grieve the family I'd wanted, making room for the one I could choose. My family's outcomes unfolded slowly. Greg and Ellen moved to Portland, their Pine Hollow status tarnished by the resort fiasco. Greg's bank demoted him after clients, hearing the Gazette story, questioned his ethics. Ellen's marriage strained under the debt from their stay, and her PTA crown slipped as moms whispered about her entitled stunt. They cut contact, their silence a relief more than a loss. Susan reached out 3 months later, mailing a letter to the resort. "I was wrong to push you away," she wrote, admitting her pride had blinded her. "Can we talk?" I read it on the terrace, the mountains steady around me, and felt no rush to reply. Dr. Ellis had taught me boundaries weren't betrayal. They were self-respect. I sent a brief note, thanking her but keeping distance, open to coffee someday, but not yet. Harold never wrote, but Clara heard he'd started volunteering at a Pine Hollow shelter, a quiet shift I hoped was growth. A new challenge arose in rebuilding community trust. The Gazette's story had split Pine Hollow. Some saw me as a hero, others a traitor. I faced it head-on, sponsoring a youth art program at the library I'd loved as a kid. I mentored teens, teaching them to sketch the Cascades, and donated Cascade Haven's event space for their showcase. Locals attended, including Mrs. Carter, my old teacher who'd snubbed me at the party. She hugged me, teary, saying, "I misjudged you." The program grew, and I launched a scholarship for Pine Hollow kids to study hospitality, turning whispers into cheers. The adversity of division became a bridge, tying me to the town on my terms. Professionally, I soared. Cascade Haven won an Oregon Tourism Award, its eco-friendly cabins and farm-to-table ethos drawing national press. I expanded, buying a vineyard to supply our restaurant, and hired Mia as a junior manager, her loyalty earned. Harper became a mentor, introducing me to investors for a second resort in Bend. My Seattle roots deepened too. I joined an art co-op, exhibiting sketches at galleries, a dream I'd shelved for years. The resort's success wasn't just mine. It was Clara's, Mia's, the staff's. a family forged through trust, not blood. Personally, I redefined connection. Jenny, my Seattle rock, became my anchor, hosting game nights where I laughed until my sides hurt. Clara and I grew closer, planning a hiking trip to celebrate Cascade Haven's 10th year. I started dating Ryan, a Portland chef who'd catered our gala. His quiet respect, listening to my stories, admiring my sketches, felt like home. Unlike my family's demands, Ryan offered partnership, and I let myself trust, slowly. I volunteered at a Seattle youth center, mentoring girls who, like me, felt different. Their spark reminded me of the kid I'd been, sketching in Pine Hollow's library, and I vowed to protect that light in them. The biggest lesson came during a session with Dr. Ellis, marking a year since the party. "What's your truth now?" she asked. I paused, then said, "I don't need their approval to be whole. Love is mutual, not a debt." I'd spent years proving myself to a family who'd never see me, but Cascade Haven wasn't for them. It was for me, for every guest who left renewed, for every staffer who found purpose. I forgave my family, not for their sake, but mine, releasing the weight of their judgment. Forgiveness didn't mean reunion. It meant freedom. On that autumn terrace, I watched the festival unfold, kids chasing hay bales, couples dancing, Pine Hollow mingling with tourists. I'd once stood outside such scenes, an outcast in my hometown. Now, I was its heart, not because I'd conformed, but because I dared to be me. Cascade Haven glowed under the sunset, its lights a constellation of my choices. I thought of the motel where I'd planned my reveal, the conference room where I'd stood tall, the sketchbook I'd rebuilt, page by page. My family had tried to dim me, but I'd burned brighter. Have you ever had to redefine family to find your peace? Share your story in the comments. It might light the way for someone else. Like this video if my journey moved you, and subscribe to hear more tales of rising above. Hit that bell so you don't miss what's next. Thanks for joining me, and remember, true family doesn't demand your light, it helps you shine.